And welcome into another installment of JC and Morgan. He's JC Sherbert, 24/7 Sports. I'm Mike Morgan of ESPN and the SEC Network. We continue this month as we're wrapping up the month of May. It's been a quarterback derby from Tim Couch to Shane Matthews to Greg McElroy, Danny Kanell, and our next guest. Certainly, you remember. I always say that, but I mean, I always have to remember like there are 20-something-year-olds that do listen to this podcast, and maybe they aren't that familiar with Ryan Leaf. Well, you're going to learn then if you're 23 years old and you don't know anybody that was like pre 2010. We're going to educate you. For everybody else, you're probably pretty familiar. Had a record breaking career at Washington State. He was a Heisman Trophy finalist. He was the number 2 pick in the draft. And since then, since his playing career has been over, he has been through a lot of different things. We don't have enough time to get into everything, but more importantly, as of the present day, doing a number of different things. And Ryan, I know you and I had a chance to do some TV. I know you're big into that. You're big into some other things. So we'll get a chance to get into all of that. But first off, let me say hello and welcome. I know you can't see me on camera right now, but trust me, we're smiling and happy to have you on and say welcome aboard.
Appreciate it, buddy. Good to hear from you again. Yeah, you've had some good quarterbacks along the lines there.
Those are a lot of your contemporaries, right? I mean, whether it was college or the pros.
Timmy Couch for me, that dude may be one of the most impressive quarterbacks I'd ever seen in my life. So that's fun to hear from him. He's a good dude.
And you guys, I know when we had Tim on, you and I were texting back and forth. So I know you guys have, some kind of a relationship as so many players that played in the same era do. But you could look at your careers or some similarities in that. I mean, you had ridiculously good college careers and then your high picks in the draft. And then for various reasons, it doesn't work out in the NFL the way you hope to. And that's always going to be something attached to guys like that. It's just the nature of the beast when you are a really good college player. It doesn't matter what the sport is. And then you're a really high draft pick. If it doesn't work out the way everybody thought it would, sometimes you get remembered for that. And I know one thing you said to me about that. You said, look, hey, no excuses. I don't shy away from that. It is what it is. Kind of talk about that a little bit and how you kind of look at that now, years after the fact, and how you're at peace with the way things turned out for you.
Well, because I was never supposed to go. Either was Tim.
Mm-hmm.
Supposed to go to the NFL. I was never, ever supposed to go to the NFL. The average length of a career in the NFL is 2.8 years. I played for 5. I think a lot of us have gotten lost in the idea around things that we couldn't control. One, the expectations that were placed on us. We had nothing to do with that, except other than playing worldly in college. And secondly, we didn't get to choose where we went. We had no say other than to say, we're not going to play for you, Cleveland Browns, San Diego Chargers. That's our only recourse. So you don't have either one of those says in anything other than wanting to play professional sports. And you have to wear the anchor of what people ultimately want to call you. When in reality, the guys that were supposed to do their jobs, apparently, the general managers, the scouts, you could argue that they are the ones that should wear the anchor of bust, or the team. You just never see general managers walking hand in hand with the players. Now, don't get me wrong, we didn't perform at a high enough level to be considered. I don't know what you would want it to be considered of. What about the quarterback that was drafted in the 6th round and played for 5 years and threw 4 touchdowns? Would you argue his career was a failure, or it wasn't great, or wasn't good? I have a hard time imagining that anybody who made it that far and got a chance to play in the NFL, you would say that. So I think it took time for me to just maybe have some perspective around it and be pragmatic enough to go, hey, You were never supposed to get there. You played 5 years in the NFL. You got to throw one touchdown. Um, I think I took on the expectations because I was drafted so high. I think I took on, um, the fans' um, judgment of it all. When in reality, it is true. It's actually a um, manufactured narrative, and it's one that every single year is written about, is brought back out, and it's affected a ton of people negatively, mental health wise, me in particular, and it's still affecting a lot of the guys whose names get brought up year in, year out. And I don't fully think the media understands um, their part in all this, along with general managers who, in the wake of the salary cap for rookies now, can completely whiff on a guy just because they want to maybe hit it big, but there's probably a better chance that he's not going to be a great success in the NFL, because you can just move right on. A la Josh Rosen to Kyler Murray in 1 year. It doesn't matter anymore. And so maybe I'm too close to it because, of course, I'm the one that gets called a bust, or I'm the one that isn't considered to have had a great career. But I don't think I am. I think I just have a perspective and a clarity mind now about what this is. And interesting enough, me being on the analyst side of things now, and now having a platform like, hosting Good Morning Football all 3 days of the NFL draft this year, talking to people about how Will Levis won the first round because he wasn't a first round quarterback, yet he was able to slip to the second round, and he won't have to wear that. He won't have the expectation. He's not expected to start for Tennessee this year.
Mm-hmm.
Where Anthony Richardson, plain and simple, he's a starter on day one. He just is. And if things don't work out, Jim Irsay, all he has to do, now he may have to fire Ballard simply because this would be another miss and you have to move on. But I mean, owner-wise, he goes, hires another general manager, and they go find another quarterback. That's the way it works. When in reality, you should be like, no, Jim Irsay, the Colts, boy, they are absolute busts when it comes to getting quarterbacks. And
I was just
so that's just my perspective on it.
Yeah, no, and it's a good one at that. And obviously, and you mentioned one of the platforms you're on, and I think you're the perfect guy to break that down. And I'd love to see more of you on the draft coverage, and we'll get into that later, because too, the Anthony Richardson thing is you drafted a guy that, quite frankly, wasn't that good in college, so you are really taking a leap of faith there. The difference between an Anthony Richardson and obviously going back to you and your draft, you had an unbelievably productive career in college, and leading Washington State to a Rose Bowl, which that has not happened a whole lot in that school's history, to say the least, and to finish as a Heisman Trophy candidate. I think one of the things that people, because the NFL is littered with top 10 quarterback picks that never, quote unquote, panned out, right? Like they didn't turn out to be the franchise guy that had 15 years in the league and was a Pro Bowl quarterback. That's more common than it is uncommon. But people can't separate you from the guy that went ahead of you in Peyton Manning that turned out to be a Hall of Famer. And so I wonder, like, if you went in another year and you were number 2 and you were behind who knows who, would we even be talking about that draft in the same way?
Well, probably not. I mean, it's one of the things I speak about when it was the start of the internet, first off. So I'm dating myself here a little bit. It was really the start of the internet. And then I was drafted alongside arguably the greatest quarterback to ever play in the NFL. So, that's going to be a heavy comparison, especially since it came down to the wire on whether or not Indianapolis was going to take Peyton Manning or myself. So, I mean, if it was that close in terms of who you were going to draft, to have one be incredibly successful, which I would say, there's 300, I think there's 370 Pro Football Hall of Famers ever in the history. The fact that he ended up being one of those out of the 370, I mean, that goes a long way of telling you of how well that worked out. And on my end, it didn't. San Diego Fluttered around for 3 years during my time there, though, because of how poor we were as a team and how poorly I played, and my availability, being injured my entire second year and most of my third year. They were able to go get Drew Brees and LaDainian Tomlinson and start to build something pretty special in San Diego. And they certainly haven't missed at the quarterback position since. They got Drew Brees, Phillip Rivers, and now Justin Herbert. So, it's not necessarily the thing that that people make it out to be. How it would tear down a franchise for years to come and things like that. It set something up for something beautiful for San Diego. Unfortunately, it wasn't with me. And I also think what gets lost in a lot of this is that, no one didn't, there weren't any higher expectations to be successful than my own, right? There were no fans' expectation. There was no media. There was no teammates. There was no coaches. There was no one's expectations of me that were higher than mine. So I guess that's ultimately always going to be the thing that sets it apart. That's like I didn't live up to my expectations, what I had for myself. Maybe they were unrealistic, but they were unrealistic my whole life. Coming from Great Falls, Montana, I'm the only first round draft pick ever from the whole state ever. So trailblazer. We don't know what we're doing. I just knew I wanted to be a professional athlete, and so I competed and I competed and didn't necessarily develop the skills to deal with failure. Well, failure on the highest level. It's love the false equivalency of the NFL player's job to anybody else's job,
Mm-hmm.
And it's just not. It's not. You can't make the comparison. And for whatever reason, to the layman, they love it. It's like, I could have done this if, this, that, or that hadn't happened, and no, you couldn't, you wouldn't, and you couldn't. That's why you didn't. So, those are just, I think, maturity over time, perspective, and kind of looking at things pragmatically, about what it really is. And so I've almost kind of become an advocate around the idea of because I know some guys that are really burdened by the branding that the media and fans have gone about their business. I, on the other hand, have just embraced it. In fact, I've removed the power from it. I named it my podcast, right? I've made a bunch of money off the fact that people have called me bust. In fact, I'm probably going to make a hell of a lot more money in the next couple of years because everybody calls me bust.
Right.
And so, but there are guys that are not. Guys are struggling with it mightily, and it's important for me to support them, and by doing so, talk about what manufactured narrative has been created around what other people think is a non-successful career.
Ryan, I covered national college football recruiting for 15 years, did the star ratings, ranked guys, all that. Now, you mentioned the internet when you got drafted was just kind of coming into play. And I wonder, when you talk about the labels, and I think, even though I made a good living off of it, I think the labels these days are unhealthy for high school players in some ways, leading to fan expectations even at the college level. You're from Great Falls, Montana. I don't know that we would have found you. And if you think about it, that year, Peyton Manning, on the other hand, had a famous last name. He played at a school in New Orleans with a high profile in the South, where people covered recruiting then and stuff. And he was supposed to be Peyton, right, from the start. So I wonder if maybe in some kind of a reverse way, had they had all that back when you came out of Great Falls, had you not been seen as more of a guy that, fundamentally a guy from the middle of Montana that goes to the closest Power 5 school, still 6.5 hours away, I may add, that becomes really, the next Drew Bledsoe at that school. Because, I remember thinking when I watched you play, well, here they go again. They got another tall guy that can sling it all over the yard, man. Where do they find these guys? I wonder if the expectations when you were coming out of high school at the time, if we hadn't had all this, that maybe there wouldn't have been as much of a cry of bust, because fundamentally, considering where you came from, how you developed in college, the day you were drafted, you had already overcome. You were already a success story. So I wonder if maybe the tracking back then, and on the reverse of it, it could have put more pressure on you. But I wonder if maybe back then that people wouldn't have seen that more than they did with, like, oh, well, he was second to Peyton Manning and things didn't work out or whatever. Because ultimately, if you follow you from high school through college, wow. I mean, that's going a long way in a short amount of time.
It was. No one was really looking at me won a state championship my junior year. And then I don't know how it happened. The only list I ever saw me get on was a Street and Smith's rankings list at quarterback, and I was number 9. I think Peyton was 3. Josh Booty, I believe, was number 1. Hines Ward, ironically, was a quarterback coming out of Georgia. He was, I think, it was mid 5 or 6. I think Scott Covington was on there. So that was the only list that I ever really saw myself in terms of what recruiting is. But it didn't stop anybody in the entire country from recruiting me. I got an offer from, you name the university, I was offered a scholarship from. So I had my pick of the litter. Took trips to the University of Miami, who was just coming off 2 national championships, and Dennis Erickson. Colorado, just a few years previous, had won a national championship. I really wanted to go to Colorado, but Cordell Stewart and Coy Detmer were there, and I just never thought I'd get on the field. UCLA was playing in the Rose Bowl, and Terry Donahue was recruiting me really heavily. Rich Brooks in Oregon, they would go to the Rose Bowl my freshman year. So, I had my pick. I think the only school, I don't know, maybe it's a good story now because how much I hate the University of Washington, but they were the only school that actually offered me like a specialized walk-on. They asked me to walk on, is what they asked me to do. Everybody else offered me a scholarship. So I thought that was always funny to be able to go and beat them. And then it just came down to Mike Price. Mike Price it was a leap of faith. I think there was probably something to it being close enough to home, but far enough away. And then, his pedigree. He had Jack Thompson and Mark Rippon and Tim Rosenbaugh. And then he went to Walla Walla and got this kid, brought him into Pullman and made him the number 1 overall draft pick in the NFL. And so I thought, okay, he can teach me how to play the quarterback position. And I believed him. I believed in what he told me, and it ended up being the best decision. I think a lot of times, guys who are recruited heavily all over the country, they kind of buy into the hoopla, and then they just, I don't think most people, if they looked at my list of Final 5 schools, that Washington State would have been at the top of that list. So I think it surprised a lot of people, and to this day, it's still the best decision I ever made.
You mentioned Mike Price. Sometimes I always I like the expression history will be kinder to a particular person, and it could be any field, but let's just stay with athletics. And I wonder if history will be kinder to Mike Price, because if you were following Mike Price at Washington State, and obviously this was a big reason why you chose Pullman, was because of his track record and what he was able to do with quarterbacks and how innovative his offense was. And then the whole Alabama thing happens, and it's like we just forget about Mike Price. I know he coached at UTEP, but for the most part, he was off of the national radar, and people don't talk about him the way they used to talk about him in glowing terms, because for what, nearly 15 years at Washington State, he did one hell of a job. I don't know if anybody will match what he did in Pullman. So maybe you can go a little bit deeper into that and your relationship with Coach Price and just how advanced he was in terms of a lot of the concepts maybe that we see today. He was doing it back then in Pullman.
Yeah, you got to go. If anybody wants to go down a rabbit hole and look at a coach's coaching tree, go look at Mike Price's.
Mm-hmm.
You will be dumbfounded by the star power minds of football that he mentored and brought up. Joe Tiller, Mike Zimmer, Andre Patterson, James Franklin, Chris Ball. It's been unbelievable, the coaches that have been under him, that have had great success. So funny, the day I had my pro day workout, James Franklin, head football coach for the Penn State Nittany Lions, shows up for his first day on the job as GA at Washington State for Mike Price. And this is what he saw. He saw every NFL coach, every NFL GM out on that field watching the star quarterback do his pro day workout. And he was like, okay, yeah, I picked the right spot. Incredibly innovative in the one back spread offense. I think a lot of people just assume we threw the ball everywhere too. We were the most balanced team that year in 97. We were second in the nation in total offense at 550 yards per game, 330 passing, but we rushed for 220 as well a game in a single back set. We were incredibly difficult to handle, to prepare for. I remember sitting down with Nick Saban when I went and spoke to the team when he was at LSU at the time, when Mike got the Alabama job, and he had at the time had stuck his son on self scout and scouting the offense, and he remembers coming into his dad's office saying, "Coach, I mean, we are going to have real problems with Mike Price in this offense and how multiple they are, and everything." And of course, everything how it played out there. And I think there's a big reason why no one, years or whatever you want to talk about it, has talked to, because he when he settled with Time in Sports Illustrated, there was an NDA that went along with it, and it was, let's put it this way, he could never tell me how much money it was. He was able to tell me that his lawyers would never have to work again. And I've been in his house at Coeur d'Alene, and the house that Sports Illustrated and Time Magazine built is unbelievable. So, it sucks. It was his assistant coaches. I don't have an NDA. Was his assistant coaches at Alabama at the time. Brought a couple strippers back from the bar. They had a hospitality suite. Was nowhere near them or around them. Went to the golf tournament the next day. The strippers tried to take a bunch of alcohol out the next day, and some guy at Auburn got it on the message boards and knew it. A week later, that dude was fired. And I remember flying down to Tuscaloosa. They had bought a house. They'd sold their place in Pullman. And I was like, you guys can't stay here. People were just hammering him. No matter what he tried to say and what he tried to do. He also never hung out those assistant coaches, because guess what? Both those assistant coaches are in prominent coaching positions in this country right now for big-time Power 5 conferences. And every time I show up on campus where they're coaching, let them know fucking pieces of shit is what I let them know. And I'm not gonna, I'm not gonna work with them. So I don't even. And one of them is an OC, and I won't even talk to the guy. And I'm calling his game that weekend. I don't care if I don't know what the hell he has to say. I think that's what they are. And unfortunately, to your point, Price has had to carry that. But instead, I got them out of Tuscaloosa, put them at my lake house at Coeur d'Alene. Him and his wife got to heal. They've been together since they were in high school. It was the best thing that he could do. And then he got back to doing what he does best, and that's coach football. and he went to UTEP, and guess who his first quarterback was? And a guy that he got to a bowl 2 consecutive years, who would go on to be one of the best at the collegiate level, one of the best to get to the NFL level, and now is maybe at the top of doing what he does and preparing guys for the NFL draft and for the NFL moving forward, in Jordan Palmer. And so and Jordan and I had this conversation, like, everything that Jordan teaches pretty much is exactly what Mike Price taught us, the warm up, all the thing. And I told Mike a long time ago, Mike, you need to get in on this, man. All your stuff's being taught to all these top quarterbacks by Jordan and other guys. So I love him. It's like a second father to me. I have his back like nobody's business. And it goes to show that when you find the right coach, every level, like I despise my high school coach. He is an absolute douchebag. I love my high school football, basketball coach. He is a guy that it's just amazing how you find the right ones that know how to coach you and get the best out of you instead of, demeaning you, try to doing things differently. Mike Price was that guy. Kevin Gilbride, when I first got to San Diego, that's my dude. Like, love confrontation. I love battling back and forth with my coaches, and then us figuring it out together, and then coming together and winning. And then they, San Diego fires him in week 5, and they hire, Mike Riley, who I don't know has ever had a confrontational moment in his life, other than having to deal with me, because I was going to be confrontational with that dude. It's just hilarious. And so, yeah, I love that guy, Mike Price. I will go to bat for him no matter what. And I don't have no NDA. So, no
obviously, yeah. Well, we don't either. So speak freely.
Yeah.
I forgot about the whole Sports Illustrated thing and how he did cash in on that, because I remember hearing.
I heard it was like, I heard it ended up being like $400 million or something like that.
I didn't know it was anything like that, but I remember just asking somebody in the writing profession, so he knew kind of SI world better than I did. And I was like, what are we talking here? Like, $1 million? He goes, Mike, you're not even close. It was a gaudy amount.
It was, imagine this, future earnings of what Nick Saban made at Alabama was what Mike Price was set to do there with what he was going to do offensively. With the talent that he had, he produced defenses too. Guess what? At Washington State, he had defensive coordinators had the #1 defense in the entire country. My freshman year, their Palouse Posse, the defense, all 11 starters would go play professionally. And they were the #1 ranked defense in the entire country my freshman year. And I scout teamed against them. I went against them every single week. The best thing that could have happened to me in my redshirt year was to go against that defense. So it wasn't like Mike Leach, who would produce the best offense in all of football, but could never find a coordinator to figure it out because it was so lopsided in terms of time of possession. We handled the ball. We gave the defense time to prepare and get ready, and then they would go out and dominate. And he was an all-around football coach in terms of how he recruited. He utilized the Prop 48 back in the 90s like nobody else's business. He got kids that just couldn't qualify and were set to go to USC and Alabama and Penn States and the Miamis of the world. He got them on campus. He got them eligible, and they went out and ended up being some of the best players that Washington State ever produced because Mike Price believed in him. There was never someone out there that Mike Price wouldn't take a chance on and try to build into something bigger and better as a player, as a human being. And there are people lined up out the door that would have his back like I do, just because of all those things. And I know a lot of those coaches that I talked about earlier would be the same way.
I'm glad you said what you said, because I think again, he's one of those names that there belongs a bigger prominence surrounding him. Heck, I remember he had UTEP in the top 25. UTEP, that's one of the worst jobs in college football. He was taking UTEP to bowl games, for crying out loud. I mean, he had these acts. Like, I remember when we were playing.
getting ready to play Cal. We're in our we're getting ready to play Cal, and we're in the like the dining hall, and all of a sudden we hear this 50-year-old man jump up on the table and start screaming, I'm so excited, by the Pointer Sisters, trying to get us all ramped up for the Cal game. And then at UTEP, he really kind of brought in the minor aspect of things. They have this like tunnel that you come out of the field with. Well, he'd come out with a freaking pickaxe, like an ore digger's pickaxe, throw that sumbitch in the ground, and that whole little bowl, the UTEP Miners Bowl, it would fill. They were
Yeah.
excited. People would go crazy. He just knew how to motivate. He was ahead of his time. And there's, like I said, there's a reason why the guys that he put under his wing have had incredible success at the NCAA level.
That's really interesting stuff. I want to ask you one more question down memory lane, but I also want to get into some current stuff, and I know we're on a clock here. Just one more thing I have to ask: the Heisman Trophy experience. Now it just kind of feels like, I don't know, I don't want to say played out, but it's just different. It's just different than it was back in, well, obviously the 80s, and I'm sure before I was born, but the 90s. I mean, these are vivid memories for me. I'm in college or graduating college, and I was always a college football fan, but now I'm just fanatical. And I remember that Heisman Trophy ceremony like it was yesterday. But what was it like for you going through that whole process?
It's still to this day the coolest, best thing that football. The only Washington State finalist ever to go to New York. My family got to go. My dad, in particular, Coach Price, he was honored as the best. I think he won a bunch of national coaches awards that year, and it's still to this day the coolest thing. I knew I wasn't going to win. I should have. I was the best college football player that year. Led the nation in passing in a year where their Peyton Manning existed. How the hell does that happen? Took a team to a Rose Bowl for the first time in 67 years. So yeah, I probably should have won it, but I knew I wasn't. It was like no expectation. Like, it was just fun. Coach Price and I, we went to see Saturday Night Live after the event. After Charles won it, which was cool. You got the trophy, you're the Heisman Trophy winner, but he had to stay there all night. He had to sign autographs, do pictures, do all the things. And Peyton and his family, of course, everybody assumed he was going to win. And I had heard that they had rented out like a restaurant and stuff, and they were just going to celebrate. And of course, that didn't happen. And then poor Randy Moss he was having a panic attack, an anxiety attack all night long, and he wouldn't take off his glasses.
You're kidding. He was having a panic attack?
He was so fearful, I think, that his past was going to be regurgitated and brought up, and now I can totally relate to that feeling of what he was going through. And I would have, gosh, I wish I could have been there for him and just kind of put my arm around him and made him feel more included that night. It was just so odd because he never took off his glasses the entire night. He was disassociated. And, people, instead of people having some understanding around, of course, people made fun of him. And so I don't know if I didn't win it, but I may have had the best night. Coach Price and I went to Saturday Night Live. Helen Hunt was hosting, and Jack Nicholson showed up and did a few skits and cameos, which was awesome. They were promoting their
as good as it gets.
As good as it
gets.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think he ended up winning an Oscar for it. And then after that, we went back to I think a downtown bar called the Town Crier, and all the former winners were there, and all the ESPN talent. And I ended up behind the bar bartending and just having a blast. Me and Gino Torretta just like running that place that night. And I remember looking back at and seeing my dad in like a little circle of former winners and thinking this. I mean, he was 47 at the time. I'm 47 now. Like if I had a son who was up for the Heisman Trophy and getting to, coming from Montana, a guy that went and spent 2 tours in Vietnam, came back and raised 3 kids, and was in New York watching his son be honored and getting to hang out with all his heroes, the guys he grew up watching. I mean, wow, I'd just be like, what a cool freaking thing this is. And that's exactly what he did. And I looked up at one point and the little group was gone. My dad was gone. And I'm strolling back into, and this was back before 9/11. So the Downtown Athletic Club, which was historic, and they gave everybody these hotel rooms, and the rooms were incredibly old, right? It was just the history behind it all. And in the lobby was this old piano. And as I walked into the Downtown Athletic Club, I don't know what time it was, 3, 4 in the morning. There's a bunch of former winners, SIDs, and athletic directors. A few civilians hanging around, and they're all singing fight songs and karaoke and everything like that. And smack dab right in the middle of it, wouldn't you know, is John Leaf just belting out with these Heisman Trophy winners and icons. And I remember just before, I didn't go say anything to him. I didn't take anything away from it. This was not my night. I just remember looking at him going, this is the coolest thing. And if I could cry at the time, I probably would have. But still to this day, it is absolutely the coolest thing that sports has ever given me, was to be a part of the Heisman Trophy ceremony.
I've probably heard dozens of people talk about that experience. I don't know if anybody lived it up better than you did. At least described it any better. That's awesome. Not to mention the 4 finalists. That's a historic group. I mean, that's 3 Hall of Famers.
Yeah, there's three Pro Football Hall of Famers and me. So yeah, I think that also lends itself to maybe the bus thing because of,
because of the
to
company
that point though. To that point though, like I said, like I should have won it. I was the best college football player that year.
Yeah,
and ironically, it's funny how it played out.
Well, and I remember that's when I first started doing sports talk radio. I mean, I'm just a baby at that point in this business, and I just remembered I sensed the people in the media that were much more established than me at that time, as a 22-year-old or whatever. I could sense that there was this swell of national people that wanted to say, "Look at me! I voted for the first defensive player."
No, it's the only defensive player. So,
well, yeah, to this day, and honestly, not to take away anything from Charles Woodson,
they had what was it from Jerry Maguire? Kushlash. They were tired of hearing Peyton's name.
Yeah, there's no doubt.
He won an SEC title. Everything he was asked to do. Peyton Manning deserved to win the Heisman Trophy that year. If there was a career award, like, dude deserved it. And people were just kind of sick and I think it's a big reason why I got so much play going into the draft. I think people were just sick and tired of maybe kind of this guy's too good to be true. He's just too good to be true. And turns out he wasn't.
When it comes to there's cultural things that were happening during that time too. I mean, I remember that well. There were a lot of people that were like, "Oh, here is the silver spoon son of a quarterback who's had everything handed to him. Yes, he's good. He has ability, but he didn't beat Florida." And it was just like this. They were trying to find ways. Florida. Nobody, exactly. Nobody was beating Florida those years. And they were trying to find ways to poke holes into Peyton. And they were trying to find ways to tell you Charles Woodson, a defensive back, deserved the Heisman. Well, look, he returned kicks, and look, he played some reps at wide receiver. I don't even think he's the best defensive player that I've seen in college that I would have voted for a Heisman. I mean, there's other guys before and after him. I know Hugh Douglas finished second one year at Pitt, but there have been more dominating players in college football on the defensive side of the ball since Charles won it that never won it, or even finished in the top 3, or even got invited to New York. But that'll always go down as a historical voting process, and the way everything went down. There was just some people.
Yeah, and somehow I voted. Somehow I finished third. Somehow I beat Randy Moss. Figure that one out.
Yeah.
So.
That's crazy stuff. All right, let's get into a little bit of contemporary, because I know we got a hard out. I got to get your thoughts on this past draft because I thought it was fascinating. I'm a draft nerd to begin with, and it all starts with the quarterback position. It always does. But there's a lot of you mentioned Anthony Richardson going earlier. You mentioned Will Levis. Of course, you've got Bryce Young, number one, and then you've got Stroud. What did you make of all that? How would you have if you're Ryan Leaf, the general manager? Where would you rank those guys?
I had Bryce Young and C.J. Stroud clearly at the top. Well, those were the only two guys I had with first round grades. So we'll put it that way. I actually thought C.J. was a better fit in Carolina, but when the S2 test got leaked, that became a I give Houston a ton of credit that they saw it as another variable, and what they saw in film did not.
Can you explain to the
match.
people out there what that is? Because you had to take the Wonderlic. What is this S2 test that we just started hearing about the last couple of years?
It's a reactive test, is what it is. It was essentially built to be one of the best possible measuring devices for a football player's knowledge in terms of reaction time, peripheral vision, things like that. I asked a couple general managers and scouts around. I go, how much stock are you putting into the testing aspect? It's one of the variables. We don't weigh it anymore. So if 9 out of the 10 variables show he's a first round draft pick, and one of them says it's not, then he's still a first round draft pick. Okay, and I just think it got overblown, and I was so pleased that Houston stepped up and grabbed a guy that I think is going to have a heck of a career in C.J. Stroud. There's nothing. I've watched the film over and over, and as you have, I'm sure, dude is as accurate as it can be. Had no problem processing and finding guys down the field with his accuracy. Touchdowns versus interceptions, doesn't turn it over. So yeah, those two far and away were at the top of the list. And then after that, you go down the list. I had Hendon Hooker much higher than everybody else did. I had him as a second round guy. I had Will Levis as a second round guy. I had Anthony Richardson as a third round guy. So, having said that, general managers don't care. If they feel like someone has a ceiling that can disrupt and be a difference maker, they'll do whatever they have to do to make that work. And so I was pleasantly surprised that no one drafted Will Levis that high. I was, as far as you want to say about how much money you get with the first contract in terms of where he was picked in the second pick of the second round. Yeah, I get it. I get that. But I tell you right now, it's going to serve him better to get that second contract, which is going to be the hundreds and hundreds of $1 million contract than the one that would have came with his rookie deal, and having all that pressure playing for, I don't know, if he goes to Indianapolis or wherever he goes. These guys got to wear that anchor. And Anthony Richardson, unfortunately, is going to be starting week 1. And if it doesn't work out, if it doesn't play out, they can move on. But no one will let Anthony Richardson move on. Now, I think this guy's got a pretty good head on his shoulders. We all think we do until you meet failure at the highest possible level with the biggest microscope you can have possible. Where Will Levis, he will not have to wear that anchor. In fact, he will not be expected to play. In fact, if he were to play, it would already mean he's surpassed everybody's expectation through the process, and then Hendon Hooker to Detroit. I think Hendon Hooker is a guy that if he isn't injured that late in the season, you guys know that. I mean, you covered the SEC.
Yeah.
Bryce Young wasn't the SEC player of the year offensively. He wasn't the first team quarterback. He wasn't. I tell people that and they go, what are you talking about? Hendon Hooker.
Hooker threw the best deep ball in the SEC. I'm not even sure it was close.
No, it wasn't.
And so, so I really liked him. I don't know if Detroit's the right fit for him. So I think Jared Goff knocks it out of the park this year and gets a long-term extension. But maybe they Jimmy Garoppolo'd him. But it's 25 years old. I don't know if that was the right. If you're going to Jimmy Garoppolo somebody, take somebody who's 22 years old, showcase that he can play really good and get a couple bigger, maybe some draft picks for him. I just don't know where he sits in Detroit. I would have liked to have seen him somewhere else where he actually had a chance a year from now. I actually thought Seattle may move back up into the first round
Mhm.
late, I think, with Philly and grab him and have him sit behind Geno for a year or two. But we'll see. We'll see how that plays out. Really like them. A lot riding on Anthony Richardson and Bryce Young and C.J. Stroud. That's for sure.
I think it's going to be a fascinating timetable to watch those guys because the numbers say a couple of them are going to pan out and the rest not so much. I mean, that's just if you just go by pure numbers, never do all the first, second round guys all just turn out to be perennial starters and have successful runs.
And the three teams that we're talking about, Carolina, Houston, and Indianapolis, are bad
Yes,
football teams.
they've been bad for
That
a
also
while.
that also doesn't get thrown into the algorithm a lot of the times. Is like,
Right.
there are difference makers in this world, right? There are Burrows, there are Ben Roethlisbergers, there are Cam Newtons, there are Trevor Lawrences, where they walk into a room team that is god awful and the environment changes. Doesn't mean you're a bad quarterback if you can't do that, but you need a lot of help. You need a lot of help around you in terms of a good team. And so that's a big variable in the algorithm that doesn't get talked about enough when you're examining quarterbacks and whether people think that's a success or not. You look at the team. The team was horrible. The team was terrible. Was not a success.
I tell people all the time.
That's part of it.
I called Pat Mahomes 2 of his games at Texas Tech. I mean, he was good, but everybody in that system was good. Mike Leach had it going on. Nobody could defend it. And if you would have told me that he was going to become the best thing since sliced bread, I'd be lying if I said I saw it on those particular Saturdays. However, if Pat Mahomes went to a situation like the Jets have been, or the Lions, or pre the last couple of years, the Lions, and you didn't have Andy Reid, and you didn't have all these weapons like a Hall of Fame tight end, and for a while there, the Cheetah and Tyreek Hill. Pat Mahomes' greatness eventually, I'm sure, would surface, but he doesn't just burst onto the scene the way he does right away in the NFL because you don't have all those things around you. Like a lot of quarterbacks drafted high to bad teams typically don't have that.
Yeah, it's a lot about where you go, and I know people don't want to hear this that love the GOAT and Tom Brady, but Tom Brady doesn't go to New England. Let's say he goes to Cleveland in the 6th round. Maybe I think Spurgeon Wynn was drafted ahead of him that year.
Yes, he was.
If he was the one drafted to Cleveland, I don't know if we've ever heard of Tom Brady, and that's not a slight against him. He just outlasted everybody. He outworked everybody, and he had some breaks. If Mo Lewis doesn't, break those sternum, get in that year. There's a lot. Drew doesn't come in that game in the AFC Championship and get him to the Super Bowl. Tom Brady doesn't win that first Super Bowl. I mean, there's just so much that you can look back on. What the guy did was work his tail off and kept working, and he was in a great environment to be successful. And so a ton of those things need to be manufactured.
Right.
And that's just the way it goes. It's just the way it goes. You have to have, of course, the right mentality and mindset to deal with failure in a healthy, positive way. He certainly did. Right. I don't know if I could have sat my whole freshman year, or not my freshman year, my rookie year, not played a bit, worried about whether I was going to get cut or not to make the team. Those types of things people deal with much differently. And so, yeah, it's always fun to look back at those things and know that, what kind of perspective you're viewing it through, what lens you're viewing it through.
And he sat some in college at Michigan, for that matter, talking about fighting through.
My last game was against
That's right.
him, and
that's right.
And he couldn't even get on the field.
Yeah,
so,
that was Greasy, right?
Yeah, it was Brian Greasy.
Greasy was the guy. All right, do we have time to get into a little pack talk? I know the clock is working against us a little bit. I've just
one question. I gotta run and do this thing, but yeah.
All right, just tell me what's going to happen with the pack in general, because there's a genuine concern about its survival at this point. And then I know you're excited, like a lot of people, about a great quarterback crop in the pack this year, regardless of what happens in the future.
Yeah, I mean, what the SEC was to quarterbacks this year, I think the Pac-12 will be next year. And ironically enough, they're all transfers, right? They're all transfers. Michael Penix Jr. from Indiana, Bo Nix from Auburn, DJU from Clemson, Caleb Williams from Oklahoma, all those situations, ultimately, even Cam Rising came from Texas initially. So it's, Cam Ward came from um, down in South Texas from the Division I AA school, and it is, and they found a home, and they're very, very good. And this year's matchups are going to be really fun to watch. Yeah, unfortunately, you have two of the biggest brands of the Pac-12 leaving after this year, in UCLA and USC, when it comes to football and basketball, and heading to the Big Ten, and so that's put it in jeopardy. And with the pending media rights deal and what Larry Scott, more and more we're hearing the former commissioner on kind of, I've used the word anchor a lot because I think that's a very apropos word in terms of what can weigh people down. And it's certainly weighed down the conference in terms of its viability. But I also think this is all heading in one central direction. And I saw this years and years ago, and it's just taken a little more time. But I think ultimately we're going to have a national collegiate football league, just like the NFL. We're going to have two conferences made up of 18 to 22 teams that the presidents of the university, who sit in front of a spreadsheet, look at it and see what the money looks like in terms of what's the best results, and that's what it becomes. NCAA will not be part of this. They'll host their own playoff. They'll have a commissioner or a czar to oversee it. There will be caps on the NIL aspect of things, more unionized. And I think this was ultimately where it was going all along. It's just taken a longer time to get there. That doesn't mean the Pacific Conference goes away. It does mean my alma mater most likely won't be invited to the National Collegiate Football League, but they will be part of a Pacific, 10, 12. I don't know what the conference will look like then. And they'll still play football, and they'll still be Cougars, and they'll still be vying for championships. Unfortunately, it will never be like what we had in '97, where we got a chance to play for the national championship. That would be when you have a magical season. The underdog wouldn't get that chance, but some universities just can't keep up in terms of where where the money's going. So I'm not fearful of that. I don't what it is. We get to see good football. That's all I care about. That's all I want to see is good football. I don't want to see, Georgia play, the Citadel on the third week of October or whatever. I want to see them play Alabama every year. I just want to see good football. So if that's what we'll get with that, I'm more than happy to ride with that deal. So that's where I think it's going. I think we're going to see a great year of offensive football in the Pac-12 conference in its final true form of the Pac-12 with all 12 teams.
I wish you were wrong on a lot of what you just said, but I'm fearful that a lot of what you just said is going to come to fruition, just a matter of the timetable. But in the meantime, the Pac-12 is just playing defense and trying not to get poached some more by a number.
I believe the media rights deal is going to come in incredibly underwhelming.
Yeah, I do too.
It's gonna frighten some of these teams that feel like they can have a bigger piece of the pie. And like I said before, these decisions aren't going to be made by coaches, by athletic directors, by players. It's going to be made by presidents of the university sitting in a conference room looking down at a spreadsheet. That's what this is ultimately going to come down to. And I don't know if enough people have been able to wrap that around their head enough. That's who's making these decisions, right? It wasn't Mike Bohn making the decision to go to the Big Ten, right? It was the president of the university, giving him the okay. Yeah, go ahead. Sign off on this because of all the money that comes in from the media rights deal that they have secured for the Big Ten Conference. And unfortunately, George Kliavkoff, for as good as he's been in his early tenure, he was stacked behind an 8 ball to start this thing out. And it's been a real struggle. And unfortunately, it's not going to be, no one's gonna step up to the plate and really show a lot. And so there's going to be teams that are brands in this conference, or at least they believe they're brands, that are going to be looking elsewhere. And that's where the united, I think the national united front, whatever Oregons and Washingtons and wherever they end up, that will just inch it closer to whatever that National Collegiate Football League will look like.
It's
Washington
a
State
shame
was in
because
the-
oh, go ahead, JC.
Washington State was in the movie Volunteers with John Candy. Remember Tommy from Tacoma
Yep.
sang the fight song. How can we have college football without the Cougs? And
Not to mention the
I
guy who's
just-
got the flag every
the
week
flag
on game
at
day.
game
They wouldn't be out of college football.
Well, I mean, yeah, I'm talking the highest level. Yeah, but yeah, I get what you mean. I get what you mean. I've got a lot of respect for Washington State. Money.
So do I.
To me, well, obviously, yeah, money to me, I know it drives it, but there's some things that are more important than money. And that's, I don't know, that kind of thing gets me.
I am a originalist. I am a idealist when it comes to college football and its purity and its innocence. But like I said, you and I aren't making those decisions. It's the presidents of those universities. And
I just don't mess with my Pac-10, Pac-12, Pac-8, whatever we're left with after dark. Like that's like a tradition for me.
I love those. I love those schools.
I can't handle it. I moving to the East Coast was. Don't move to the East Coast if you love college football, people. It's just an absolute kick in the ass.
You got to be a night owl, Ryan. You got to be a night owl.
I can't do it. living in LA, watching college football, man. You're up at 6:30. You're up at 6 for college game day. The latest you'll go to bed is 11 because the games are over by that time. And so
get a nice brunch on, man. That's awesome. Yeah,
different way of life. Again, Ryan, I can't thank you enough for the time. There's a million things we can talk about, and maybe next time we'll have you on. We'll get to some other stuff. Great work at PointsBet USA, SiriusXM, Westwood One, and I know you and I got to do a game last year together at ESPN. I hope we'll get to do some more together in 2023. Really appreciate your story, appreciate how you've overcome so much, and really appreciate the work that you do on air and on all those forums, and we really thank you for the time.
You bet. Good to see you guys. Glad we got to finally see that mug about halfway through this thing here, buddy. But
sorry about that. Hey, the Zoom camera, I guess they were worried that if you saw my face that close up, it would scare you from talking, but you were able to overcome the adversity, much like you did in Pullman. Anyway, Ryan, we'll let you get to other stuff. And again, thank you so much for the time. Stay in touch, okay?
You bet. You guys have a great day. Thanks for having me.
All right, bud. Thank you. Ryan Leaf. Thanks again to Ryan Leaf for joining us. I know a lot of people probably, as they're listening to that interview, want to go down the road. I mean, it's well documented, and he doesn't shy away from it. He talks about it all the time. I mean, the man's been in prison. The man has had drug issues. A lot of things went wrong after his career went south in the NFL. I wasn't trying to avoid that for any reason. He certainly didn't tell us to stay away from it. It's just only so much time, and I feel like that story's been told a lot. If you've seen Ryan Leaf, he's on the Dan Patrick Show quite a bit. He'll talk about that. ESPN has done features on him. So it by no means do I want people to think like that was off limits. Like I don't do interviews where somebody says we can't talk about this. To me, it's if you ever get to that point, it's not worth having somebody on. And I've had somebody actually do that before. And I'm like, well, that's okay. We just won't have you on the show. So if you can Google it, I mean, it's well documented. But to me, it's more of a story of redemption for Ryan, and he's doing very well in his personal life and in his professional life in this space of covering college and pro football. But the stories of going back, it just takes you back, JC, to that time frame when we were all fairly young, and the Heisman Trophy ceremony stuff. That is a quartet that'll never be matched in a lot of different ways. What he did with Mike Price, if that story doesn't break, who knows? Maybe Mike Price is coaching in Alabama for 15 years and winning national titles because he was a heck of a coach. They got the hire right, but clearly a lot of things there went sideways. Anyway, really
interesting stuff he mentioned too, because I don't know. I'm gonna have to go through and look at Mike Price's coaching staff at Alabama because I don't know of who he sounds.
I could find that out. I mean, that's an easy text message to get that answer.
I may know some of those guys, but yeah, it was unfortunate because it never really, look at the time. So he's taken over from Mike DuBose. I don't think it was. Every school has a DNA. Alabama's not Florida. I don't think it was the time for Alabama to go, we're going to spread it out and throw it all over you. You know, it took Saban a while to get there too. I mean, you know, spring game that year, run the dagger ball. What are you doing? You know, and so I think they were a little unsure about it to start with. Now, it probably is going to end up like Dennis Erickson at Miami, a lot of success. You know, the last Washington State coach to come south with to a program with talent and resources. I think they were a little unsure. They'd heard maybe some chirping. Oh, why'd they hire this guy? I don't know, you know. And then that thing just spun out of control. And what happened happened. But you know, Mike Price is a hell of a coach. I mean, he you know, he built Washington State. You know, he kind of piggybacked on what Erickson accomplished there for a short period of time. Had a string of great quarterbacks, Coach Drew Bledsoe and Ryan Leaf. He gets out of there, you know, goes to Alabama, doesn't work out. But then, you know, coaching UTEP, which is one of the worst jobs in the country. But let's
Without
not
question.
I've
done a game there.
Around here.
It is. I don't know how they win. I don't know how they do it at all.
Their border rival is New Mexico State.
I don't know how they do it because I've been to Las Cruces.
And, you know, so that, and look, he was, you know, he had some winning records, Jordan Palmer, all that good stuff. So look, that was interesting. Great. I mean, we couldn't have topped off the quarterback run any better, Mike. Then I want to mention a couple of news notes. Bill McGovern, defensive coordinator for UCLA, has passed away following a battle of cancer. He's 60 years old. So Chip Kelly's DC, very well respected guy, nice guy. Never met him, but condolences to UCLA football family. Also, CBS announces their week 3 kickoff, South Carolina at Georgia. CBS, people may be surprised they didn't go with Florida, Tennessee. They like to get their Alabamas and Georgias and their big teams. Just you know, yeah, they like to get them up there, you know, as much as possible too. And you know, it's Georgia's first real, not real game, but first team with a pulse they're playing. So I see why they did it. That's the first time I think that game's been on CBS since 2017, and only like the second time since 2001 that the game when it's been in Athens has been a 3:30 kickoff on CBS. So, and it's the last year of CBS.
That's right. Yeah.
That's the one thing I'm going to miss.
Yeah.
I'm going to miss that music being affiliated with the SECs.
And I love me some Brad Nessler. We had him on. I know there are a ton of SEC fans that love Brad Nessler. So that Gary Danielson's very polarizing. I get it, but Brad is Brad, and since the last year you'll hear Brad on SEC football. But South Carolina, Georgia on the 16th, and Missouri at Arkansas on the 24th because that's a Friday, and Georgia, Florida because it's Georgia, Florida. Those are the only 3 set in stone right now for the CBS game of the week. The double headers are on the the double header is on November the 4th, and I can almost, without even looking at it, guarantee you that's what? Alabama, LSU, and then
Florida, Georgia. No,
Florida, Georgia's the week before.
Alabama, LSU, and a wild card.
What about could it be Georgia, Tennessee that week?
No, Georgia, Tennessee is the week before Thanksgiving on what used to be SoCon Saturday in Knoxville.
Who's A&M got November the 4th?
Late in the year.
Oh, it's going to kill me.
I'll figure this out.
That's going to kill. Yeah. All right. Well, you're looking that up.
I will look it up.
Here's some other things that have just come out. So as we're recording this, the meetings are going on in Destin, and really hardly anything ever comes out of this. The coaches are talking about NIL. Hugh Freeze is talking about if you want to prevent tampering, then you can't let players transfer without any type of penalty, and some random quotes from coaches here and there. But for the most part, everybody's waiting on Greg Sankey to tell us, is it going to be an 8-game or a 9-game SEC schedule? And if you read between, I mean, Greg is very calculated in everything he says. He's very, very wise and very careful with every word that he says. But if you read between the lines, I think he's all for 9. But it's not his call. This is not a, it is kind of a democracy. He is not the dictator of the Southeastern Conference, and so he's waiting for the people below him. Not going to micromanage this. And I don't know what the exact vote has to be or what, but there are clearly some programs that have put their foot in the sand and have dug in and said, no, we want to stay with the 8-game conference model. And, again, the argument to that is, among other things, if you've already got a built-in in-state rival, then that's one game less you can schedule. Another argument is the Nick Saban argument has been, well, I don't like the permanent 3 that they're proposing, so I'm not a big fan of the 9-game conference slate. If that's what you're going to throw at me for the 3 permanent opponents, to me, the compromise would be, well, then you rotate the 3 permanent opponents every few years. But anyway, so as we sit here at about 3:30 in the afternoon, nothing has been determined. I don't know whether it's going to be 8, don't know whether it's going to be 9. Kirby Smart on the SEC scheduling debate, quote, most overrated conversation there ever was. Okay. Well, what do you think, Kirby? Do you want 8 or 9? It's overrated. Okay, great. Do you want 8 or 9? Don't know. I mean, I haven't seen many coaches, JC, that have gone on the record and said, I'm absolutely in favor of a 9-game conference slate. Let's get it done. I haven't seen that. So it looked like this thing, and by the way, we're talking for 2024 on. It looked like this thing was going to be kind of a slam dunk. And then all of a sudden, more and more talk started coming out about, well, there's some people that are more than happy with just 8. And 8's been working just fine. And 8, even in a 12-game playoff, will just suit the Southeastern Conference just fine. Thank you very much. So I don't know how it's going to turn out. I'm not even going to handicap it, but that is the latest. Not much has really come out of the meetings as of Tuesday.
I think I'm fine with 8. The compromise I read the other day that I'm not in favor of, which is, okay, let's do 8 for 2024 and table this until maybe we get more money from ESPN, which just kind of give them a chance to get the funds together or whatever, because obviously you have the ESPN situation with Disney and all that. I'm not in favor of that, because the last time they did that was 2012, 2013, and they screwed everybody's schedule 6 ways from Sunday, trying to wedge. I mean, it was completely unfair, trying to wedge Missouri and A&M into the league early. And then they adopted their new rotating deal in 2014, which was less than ideal, because you had schools that didn't play each other for 15 years, but away they went. So I'm not in favor of any sort of temporary anything. I think if you're going to do 1-7 in the 8-game deal, you need to commit to doing it for 2024 and 2025. The playoff contract is up for 2026. So the TV situation is going to change in some way, one way or the other with ESPN and Disney, depending on how much ESPN and Disney are forking out. Is it going to be a multi-network deal like the NFL? How is that going to change? I think what you also have to be careful of, Mike, is this is not just Kentucky going, we're perfectly happy. And look, I'm not criticizing Kentucky, because whatever works for them works for them. But they're the only school in the league, the only school that schedules like this. It's 2 MACs, it's an FCS, and it's Louisville every single year. They get after it 1 or 2 times and have a road trip to Akron in 2027. But nobody else schedules like that. Vanderbilt really has some tough games coming up, They got home and homes with Stanford and stuff. So I understand where Kentucky's coming from, because that's worked really well for them as far as getting to bowls. And that's kind of what they want to do. Their fans love football. They want to go to bowl games, that kind of stuff. They're not trying to worry about the playoff. If it happens, it happens. It's not just them, though. I think there's something to be said, too, with how the committee selects the playoff and the mindset that they have proven that they have. And if they don't change this, and have some sort of RPI or some sort of like tangible metrics to use, if this is going to be the philosophy and you got a lot of old school people on these committees, then there's no way in hell you're getting a 9-3 Auburn team, for example, that's lost to LSU, Bama, and Georgia by a combined 7 points and beating the crap out of everybody else. By all intents and purposes, a top 7 team in the country. There's no way they're getting in over like maybe a 12-1 Clemson that got upset in the ACC championship game by Florida State that really hasn't played half the schedule Auburn has. Or I'll even go a step further and maybe a Big Ten, like an 11-2 Penn State. The committee is too focused. They have a very BCS style focus. Mm-hmm. And we saw that with Notre Dame getting in undeservedly once or twice. And I'm not saying, okay, great, they went undefeated, super. But they beat one team with a winning record or one team that was worth anything. And until they have things besides just the eyeball test, and if you want to keep that, that's fine. I do think you have to be conscious of how many losses you have in a season, regardless of how tough your schedule is.
Yeah, I agree. I think they have to. We just had the baseball selection. I'm getting ready to call another regional this week, and I can tell you the big controversy there is that they still are using RPI too much, and RPI is a flawed thing. In basketball, they switched from the RPI to the net. In football, we haven't really advanced much of anything. It's just
the net is worse than the RPI, though. I mean, it's terrible.
Yeah, there's no foolproof computer system that is going to get it right. But your point on the way they are so overly cautious to where they still think like I hate to say it, like a knuckle dragging 1958 college football coach is like, well, we had more wins than they did. So therefore, how are you going to leave us out? And so they you need nuance and context of what you're they're so I don't know what the answer is, because again, the argument is going to be, well, if you go to 9, then you're just guaranteeing half the league an extra loss, obviously. But I want to have faith that in a 12-team playoff, first off, there's going to be two loss teams in the playoff every year. Has to be. And eventually I want to believe that if there's a 3-loss team that had a third loss based on a brutal schedule, that should be able to be considered and even leapfrog a 2-loss Power 5 school that clearly did not have the same schedule. I want to believe that. I'm not sure if I'm there yet. Clearly they need to work on that if they want everybody, including the ACC for that matter, to go from 8 to 9. By the way, that November the 4th, here's the other games, JC. LSU, Alabama, you can book that now. CBS is going to jump on that like rabbits in heat. So that, and I think that game will dictate the West. The other premier games that day, Arkansas at Florida could be. A&M at Ole Miss could be.
Jimbo versus Lane Kiffin.
And then you've got Auburn, Vanderbilt, no thanks. Missouri, Georgia, So I really think it comes down to A&M, Ole Miss, or Arkansas, Florida.
Yeah, Kentucky, Mississippi State's in there too.
I didn't. Yeah. Am I missing that one? I mean, it doesn't matter. That's not going to make the fray anyway.
Hey, here's a dark horse for that day. It's not I doubt they'll do a non-conference game, but what if Jim Mora keeps winning at UConn and let's just say they're undefeated?
The fight in Jim Mora's versus Tennessee.
They got Tennessee and Knoxville that weekend, man. I mean, that would be something. I think that A&M
Big 12 bound UConn.
Yeah, Big 12. God.
Just a rumor. Just a rumor.
I know. I'd be surprised with all the smiling that's been taking place since they've been back in the Big East for both basketball programs.
Yeah, I don't think that
again join a league that's spread across the country.
Right.
Yeah, man. I mean, let's see, Missouri has a surprising year. Missouri, Georgia. Like I said, CBS likes the big dogs. They like to
They like
they
the
like to
big
put the big
dogs,
dogs
and Georgia's going to be potentially like a 20-point favorite in that game.
on.
So I don't know if Ole Miss is going to live up to the hype this year with one of their 27,000 quality quarterbacks in the stable. I don't know. I don't know if A&M is finally going to figure things out with Bobby Petrino calling plays and all those 5-star kids now sophomores and juniors. I don't know. So again, CBS doesn't have to worry about picking that game for another few months and 2 months into the season when we'll have the answers to a lot of those questions. All right, wrapping things up, JC. Again, the response on this has been terrific. We'll keep it going. It's the Fiver and Dimer segment. What does that mean? We break down 3 movies, triple play here, and 3 randomly selected movies. You've got one that's so random I've never even seen it or heard of it, but I like that. I like that. I just sounded like the head guy of Cobra Kai. I like that. I like that. Nobody touches the prima donna before the tournament. We'll pick 3, and then if you've seen it 5 or more times, it's a Fiver. If you've seen it 10 or more times, it's a Dimer. If you haven't seen it at all or just a couple of times, well, then it's neither. It's just that simple. By the way, Justin, our resident Michigan fan, he's not going to like that Charles Woodson Heisman conversation. Send your complaints to Ryan Leaf, Justin. He pointed out he's a great episode, very strong Fiver Dimers. He said you need to finish The Irishman. Great acting performances. Break it up into 3s if you have to, but it's worth it. And I agree. I mean, I've been told that by other people. I'm a Scorsese guy. Great performances. I wasn't in the right frame of mind. You got to be in the right frame of mind for that kind of movie because it's not just long. It's a little bit deliberate. Like the other Scorsese films are like on speed. You watch Wolf on Wall Street, Casino, Goodfellas. It's boom, 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 boom. That's not The Irishman at all. So, and I'm still getting crap for not seeing Uncle Buck in its entirety. And somebody jumped on me for another one that I haven't seen. Hey, look, I'm learning. This is great. This is why we do this. So, this brought to you by Look Cinemas, nationally across the country. Great Cinebistros for great food, great movie experience everywhere from Atlanta to Tampa to California to New York City and so many places in between. Check out Look Cinemas and lookcinemas.com. All right, JC, what's the first one that you have that I have not seen?
All right. I'm going to throw a Quick Change out there.
Who is in Quick Change?
And that is a Dimer for me.
A Dimer?
Bill Murray, Randy Quaid, and Gina Davis.
I like the cast.
So Bill Murray dresses up like a clown and robs banks.
What year did this come out?
1990, and Randy Quaid is like the needy, like Gina Davis is his girlfriend. They're trying to have one big score, and they're trying to make it to the airport to get out of town, right? So it's one of those. He's robbed a bank. Now we got to make it to the airport, and Randy Quaid's like the needy third wheel, and he's just like a disaster. And they run into all these roadblocks and stuff, and they try to make it, to the airport. And I won't spoil it, but it's good. I mean, I was shocked when you hadn't heard it. You're like, what's Quick Change? And I was like, oh God.
And that's 1990. That's my sweet. I was watching a lot of movies in 1990. That's my sweet spot.
I was lucky to discover it. I think because it was, the previews came out. It was one of those where it came out like right on like the same time a lot of other movies did. Like maybe beginning of summer when some hits were coming out. So it got some run, but then, isn't really something that you always see on HBO and things like that. But I've seen it enough through the years to where if it's on, I'm going to watch it. So it's a Dimer for me.
Quick Change Dimer. Put the synopsis down on the blog on jcmorgan.com so that everybody can relish the magic that is provided from Quick Change.
Yes, Quick Change.
All right, here's so we're only left with 2. I had 3 written down, but I'll just pick 2 of the 3. Tommy Boy.
Oh, that's beyond. That's a Franklin.
That's a Franklin.
I've
Yeah.
watched it probably 5 times this calendar year.
It's yeah, it's just it's Farley at his peak. Spade is the ultimate compliment. It's the buddy movie. It's the idiot versus the guy who's kind of in his own way bagging on the idiot, but the idiot seems to get the last laugh in many cases. Like, this is not a new concept in film, but if you've got the right people and the script is interesting enough to hold your attention, like it's not a poorly written movie where you're just relying on two good actors and their chemistry to carry all the weight. You actually had a storyline that was pretty decent. You know, you could the traveling salesman, like everybody knows, was one of those. Maybe people listening, maybe were one of those. Like, you can appreciate that. It's a dimer. There's so many. It's such a quotable movie, such a good movie. The only thing I would say about this, what's so sad, and I've watched a lot of Farley documentaries on his tragic death. He basically lived a Jim Belushi lifestyle. Drugs and debauchery led to his downfall. Is that they followed this movie up? Do you remember the kind of the? It wasn't really a sequel, but it was
Yeah,
the
same
next
movie. It was Black Sheep.
Black Sheep,
Kind of the same situation,
but
yeah.
terrible and not funny in my mind. I mean, Black Sheep is I saw it once and I never wanted to see it again. And I thought it just soured me. Like, I was like, gosh, you guys couldn't make another good movie?
It's above a fiver for me, Mike. But
Wow.
you know, when I first saw it, I was like, yeah, but it bothered me that it was just like Tommy Boy. And so it's like the two movies, like Tommy Boy became this classic. And this is probably after he died. And this probably had something to do with that, why I feel this way, because we never got to see him. I mean, the last movie he was in was god awful with
is that the
Perry.
Ninja one?
No, the Ninja one was then it was a Western spoof with Matthew Perry in it.
Oh, wow. That
Shoot,
sounds
I don't
awful.
remember. It was not. It wasn't very good.
I can feel the steam coming off that one now.
Yeah, but you know, so I liked Black Sheep at the beginning because that had some famous, you know, like roads. But then you start confusing them, and then it's like, you know, Tommy Boy just became so beloved because it was this, you know, this story about, you know, a redemption and following in your dad's footsteps and a human being taking on the man, you know.
Yeah.
Well, in Black Sheep, his brother basically was the man, you know. Now they did have some corrupt political rivals that they brought down, but you know, his brother was still a creepy politician and maybe a good guy at the end, but as time has gone by, those movies have separated in my mind, even though they're very similar. You know, so I'm with you there in theory on that.
I might create a new category for Black Sheep and others like it. For me, no sale. That
No sale.
I was just so. I remember renting that movie at a Blockbuster. It was so excited, and then I watched it, and I was like, "Man, what a bummer." Okay, final one.
I do want to say one thing about Quick Change, just quickly.
Go ahead.
Jason Robards is in it. Phil Hartman is in it. Stanley Tucci is in it.
It's a hell of a
supporting cast, man. Yeah, dude.
Phil Hartman, one of the funniest and brightest SNL cast members of all time.
Jason Robards is the man too. Jason Robards, he's classic
actor. Okay, final one before we say goodbye. Draft Day was on the other day. Kevin Costner. We were just talking NFL draft with Ryan Leaf. I've said this before. You know, Air has come out, and much like Moneyball, I wanted to not like the movie, but I wound up liking it. I wanted to not like Matt Damon trying to portray the story, Sonny Vaccaro, who the story revolves around, because I wasn't going to buy it. Like, come on, if you've seen Sonny Vaccaro, have you seen hunkish Matt Damon versus Sonny Vaccaro? But it plays. And then I was like, well, it's a tired story. Like, we get it. You know, Michael picked Nike and now he's making billions. I'm just telling you, it works. Same thing with Moneyball. Brad Pitt. I don't need Brad Pitt. Pretty boy Brad doing it. It works. And the story is actually captivating, even if you're not a baseball fan or an analytics geek. I didn't want to like Draft Day, and I still don't love it, but I liked it. if draft day is on and there's, nothing else on, I will watch it. So it's almost at nickel stage. I've probably seen it 3 or 4 times. And if it's on again, I'll probably watch it again because Costner's so good. The plot is just good enough, not great, just good enough that I'll give it a nickel.
Yeah, I'm there. I'm a nickel guy on it. I mean, the look, the director alone, and then the fact that Dennis Leary's in it. This guy Ivan Reitman, that directed Draft Day, Meatballs, Stripes, Ghostbusters, Twins, Ghostbusters 2, Kindergarten Cop, Dave, and Junior. And his son,
which tells me this is totally out of his comfort zone.
Yeah, but he rocked it, and so he I don't know. I mean, pretty good. He's of course dead now, but his son did the Ghostbusters the Afterlife, which was a good sequel, by the way. Much better than the all-female reboot of Ghostbusters, which I would give negative money on.
That's a no sale as well.
Draft Day was really, really good. Strong cast. It's a lot like his other movies. I mean, he really didn't make anything bad. And I like sports process movies a whole lot more than like sports action movies.
Yeah.
If that makes any sense.
Total
unless
sense.
Unless it's like a comedy like Major League, which had a lot of playing, but it was funny, right. And it kind of took you inside the game. Of course I love The Natural and movies like that, but I would, the process stuff's fascinating, starting with like Jerry Maguire, that taking you inside the world of the agent. And, I'm sure I'll like Air when I see it. And I liked Moneyball quite a bit. So this is a Draft Day would be between a $5 and a $10 for me. I'm probably at like 6 times watching it. So,
okay. That works. Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
All right. We are past out of time. Our thanks again to Ryan Leaf as the quarterback derby has continued. And remind everybody to check out the website, jcnmorgan.com. Please keep up the emails, what have you. We'll actually put an email icon on there eventually when our fine web designer gets to it, and look forward to that, and look forward to a lot of other things, and look forward to talking to you folks out there next week. For JC, it's Mike saying so long. We'll see you next time on JC and Morgan.